The date is December 29, 1972. It is a Friday night, 3 days before the new year. While the Midwest is locked in the freezing gray embrace of winter, the kind of cold we saw in Chicago with United Flight 553, Florida is different. Here the air is heavy. It is thick with humidity, carrying the scent of salt water and stagnant vegetation. To the east, the city of Miami is a glittering jewel of neon, Art Deco hotels, and the pulsing rhythm of holiday nightlife. It is civilization at its most vibrant. But turn your back on the city, look to the west, and civilization ends abruptly. To the west lies the Everglades. If calm, real historical stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing. It is not just a swamp. It is a prehistoric river of grass, a massive, ancient wetland that covers thousands of square miles. By day, it is a vast expanse of green sawgrass and dark water. But at night, on a moonless night like this one, it becomes a void. There are no streetlights. There are no houses. There are no highways cutting through the heart of it. The black water reflects the black sky until the horizon itself disappears. It is an ink-black abyss where depth perception fails and the human eye has nothing to latch onto. High above this primitive darkness, the pinnacle of 20th century technology is beginning its descent. It is Eastern Airlines Flight 401. The aircraft is a Lockheed L-1011 Tristar. In 1972, this machine is the future. It is widely considered the most sophisticated commercial airliner ever built. It features an autopilot system so advanced, it can land the plane in zero visibility without a human hand touching the controls. It has a galley in the cargo hold with elevators to bring food up to the passengers. Its Rolls-Royce engines are so quiet that Eastern Airlines markets the plane as the Whisper Liner. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is electric with anticipation. There are 163 passengers and 13 crew members on board. They have flown down from New York's JFK Airport. They are shedding their winter coats, ordering cocktails, and looking forward to the warm beaches of Miami. The flight has been flawless, smooth, routine, boring, in the best possible way. But as the massive trijet lines up for the approach into Miami International Airport, a tiny, insignificant component fails. It is not an engine explosion. It is not a terrorist bomb. It is not a structural failure of the wing. It is a light bulb, a tiny, plastic-encased light bulb worth about 12 cents. This single burnt-out filament is about to trigger a psychological cascade that will doom the most advanced aircraft in the world. It will turn a team of veteran pilots into confused spectators of their own demise. In less than 10 minutes, the Whisper Liner will cease to be a flying machine. It will become a twisted collection of metal scattered across the muddy waters of the Everglades. And in the aftermath, Flight 401 will become something else entirely. It will become the subject of the strangest legend in aviation history. Stories of ghosts, of apparitions appearing on other planes, of a crew so dedicated to their job that they allegedly refuse to leave the fleet even after death. But before we get to the ghosts, we must understand the machine. And to understand the crash, we must understand the men who believed they were in control. To appreciate the tragedy of Flight 401, you have to appreciate the Lockheed L-1011. Even today, pilots speak of the Tristar with a reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. In the early 1970s, the aviation world was in a frantic race. The Boeing 747 had launched the era of the jumbo jet, but it was too big for many domestic routes. Airlines needed a wide body that could carry hundreds of people, but land at smaller airports like LaGuardia. Lockheed's answer was the L-1011. It was an engineering marvel. It was the first airliner to have an automatic landing system certified for Cat 3B conditions, meaning it could land in fog so thick you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. It had a unique S-duct engine in the tail, giving it a distinctive, futuristic silhouette. It was designed to be the safest plane in the sky. It had redundancies on top of redundancies. 4 hydraulic systems, multiple electrical generators. It was built to be fail-safe. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 is, ironically, a brand new aircraft. It has only been in service for 4 months. It still has that new plane smell. The leather seats are pristine. The carpets are spotless. Tonight, N310EA is carrying a heavy load of holiday travelers. The mood in the back is festive. Stewardesses in their smart 1970s uniforms are collecting glasses and preparing the cabin for landing. The fasten seatbelt sign chimes on with a soft, reassuring ding. Through the windows, passengers can see the lights of Miami sprawling out like a carpet of diamonds. They are minutes away from the gate. They are minutes away from hugs, luggage carousels, and humidity. In the cockpit, the atmosphere is professional, relaxed, and deeply experienced. This is what airlines call a heavy crew. In the left seat, the captain's seat, sits Robert Alban Loft. Bob Loft is 55 years old. He is not just a pilot, he is an institution. He has been with Eastern for 32 years. He has nearly 30,000 flight hours. To put that in perspective, he has spent nearly 3.5 years of his life in the air. He is the definition of the old guard. He is a man of few words, authoritative, confident. In the culture of 1972, the captain is God. What he says goes. His skills are beyond question. In the right seat is First Officer Albert Stockstill. At 39 years old, he is the young man of the crew, though he has nearly 6,000 flight hours himself. He is a former Air Force pilot. He is competent, eager to please, and deeply respectful of Captain Loft. Tonight, Stockstill is the pilot flying. His hands are on the yoke. He is managing the energy and the path of the aircraft. Behind them, sitting at the sideways-facing flight engineers panel, is Second Officer Don Repo. Don is 51 years old, another veteran with 17,000 hours. Don is the mechanic of the group. While the pilots fly, Don manages the systems, the fuel flow, the hydraulics, the pressurization. He is a man who knows every nut, bolt, and wire in the L-1011. He takes personal pride in the health of the machine. There is also a fourth man in the cockpit tonight. Angelo Donadeo, 47, is an off-duty technical specialist for Eastern. He is riding in the jump seat, a spare fold-down seat behind the captain. He is there just for the ride, a colleague checking out the new plane. 4 men, tens of thousands of hours of experience, a brand new state-of-the-art aircraft. The weather is clear, the visibility is good. By all statistical models, this flight is the safest place to be on the planet Earth right now. The approach into Miami begins normally. The checklist is read. The speed is reduced. "Gear down," Captain Loft commands. First Officer Stockstill reaches for the heavy wheel-shaped lever on the dashboard and pushes it down. Thump, thump. The crew feels the familiar vibration as the massive landing gear doors open. They feel the aerodynamic drag as the wheels drop into the slipstream. The nose of the plane pitches down slightly, compensated by the autopilot. Stockstill looks at the instrument panel. He is looking for 3 green lights. Left main gear, green. Right main gear, green. Nose gear, dark. The light for the nose landing gear is off. Now in aviation, green means safe. Dark means danger. A dark light could mean the gear is still up. It could mean it is hanging halfway, unlocked. If they land with the nose gear collapsed, the nose of the plane will slam into the concrete at 150 miles per hour. It could spark a fire. It could cause the plane to cartwheel. "I don't got a nose gear," Stockstill says. His voice is calm, but the tension enters the cockpit instantly. Captain Loft is annoyed. This is a brand new plane. "Cycle it," he orders. Stockstill pulls the lever up, then pushes it down again. Thump. The pilots listen. They feel the thud. It feels like the gear is down, but the light remains dark. "Put the light on it," Loft says. They are now too close to the airport to sort this out. They cannot land with an unsafe gear indication. Captain Loft keys the radio. Tower, this is Eastern 401. It looks like we're gonna have to circle. We don't have a light on our nose gear yet." The controller at Miami Tower is busy, but he grants the request immediately. "Eastern 401, roger. Climb to 2,000 feet. Turn left heading 360. Maintain 2,000. Left 360, maintain 2,000. Eastern 401, Loft acknowledges. The massive airliner banks to the left. It turns away from the bright lights of Miami. It flies past the airport, past the suburbs, and heads out over the black void of the Everglades. They are going to the penalty box, a holding pattern where they can troubleshoot the problem without worrying about other traffic. They reach 2,000 feet. Captain Loft engages the autopilot. He puts it in altitude hold mode. The computer locks onto the barometric pressure. The plane levels off perfectly. It is rock steady. Everything is under control. Or so they think. The cockpit is now a scene of intense microscopic focus. The problem is the light bulb itself. The landing gear indicator on the L-1011 is a small, square plastic box about 1 inch wide. Inside, there are 2 tiny light bulbs. If the gear is down, they glow green. The crew suspects the gear is fine. They suspect the bulb is just burnt out. Captain Loft reaches out to pull the little plastic lens assembly out of the dashboard. It's designed to be removed so you can change the bulb in flight. But it sticks. "It's jammed," Loft grumbles. He fiddles with it, he twists it, he pulls it. Second Officer Don Repo leans forward from his seat. "Let me try," he says. Now we have the captain and the flight engineer both staring at a 1 inch square on the dashboard. First Officer Stockstill is flying the plane, or he should be. But the autopilot is on. So Stockstill is also watching the captain fight with the light bulb. Fourth man Angelo Donadeo leans in from the jump seat. "Try jiggling it," he suggests. All 4 men are now looking at the same tiny point in space. This is what psychologists call tunnel vision, or fixation. The entire world outside the cockpit has ceased to exist. The instruments, the horizon, the radio, it all fades away. The only thing that matters is that damn light bulb. While the captain fights the plastic lens, Second Officer Repo has an idea. "I'll go down to the hellhole," he says. The hellhole is the nickname for the avionics bay, a small, cramped compartment located directly underneath the cockpit floor. You access it through a trapdoor in the cockpit. Down there, amidst the whirring computers and hydraulic lines, there is a tiny optical spyglass. If you look through it, you can physically see the landing gear mechanism. You can see if the red lines on the struts are aligned, proving the gear is locked. Repo opens the hatch in the floor. A shaft of light from the cockpit cuts into the dark bay below. He climbs down the ladder. Now the cockpit is split. Repo is downstairs in the dark. Loft and Stockstill are upstairs, still fiddling with the light. Here is the moment the tragedy happens. It is a moment so subtle that nobody feels it. While Captain Loft is turning to talk to Repo, or perhaps while he is wrestling with the stubborn light fixture, his body leans against the control yoke. Just a nudge, a few pounds of pressure. On a Boeing 737, if you push the yoke while the autopilot is on, the autopilot fights you. If you push hard enough, it disconnects entirely with a loud cavalry charge alarm. Clack, clack, clack. You know it's off. But this is a Lockheed L-1011. It is a gentleman's airplane. It has a feature called CWS, control wheel steering. The engineers at Lockheed designed the system to be seamless. If a pilot wants to make a small adjustment, say to dodge a cloud, he can just push the yoke. The autopilot doesn't disconnect. Instead, it enters CWS mode. It thinks, "Oh, the pilot wants to change altitude manually. I will let him. I will turn off the altitude hold, but I will keep the wings level." So, when Captain Loft bumps the yoke, the autopilot dutifully switches off the altitude hold. There is no loud alarm. There is no flashing red light. The only indication is that a small switch on the dashboard flips from ALT to off. But nobody is looking at the dashboard switches. They are looking at the light bulb. The L-1011 is now in a shallow drift. The power is set for 2,000 feet, but without the computer locking the nose up, the aircraft begins to descend. It is not a dive. It is a glide. The nose drops less than 2 degrees. The descent rate is barely 200 feet per minute at first. The human inner ear is a miraculous sensor, but it has flaws. It cannot detect a descent this gradual. Without a visual reference, without a horizon, the pilot's brains tell them they are perfectly level. Outside the window, the Everglades is a sheet of black ink. There are no stars reflecting off the water. There are no farmhouse lights. The black of the sky meets the black of the swamp seamlessly. The plane is falling into a black hole, 1,800 feet. In the hellhole, Don Repo is struggling. It's dark and cramped. "I can't see the indices," he shouts up through the floor hatch. "It's too dark." Captain Loft is frustrated. "Turn on the damn light," he says, referring to a flashlight. 1,500 feet. In the cabin, the passengers are oblivious. They are chatting, finishing their drinks. They trust the crew. They trust the machine. To them, the hum of the engine sounds normal. 200 feet. First Officer Stockstill notices something odd on the periphery of his vision. The aircraft seems to be speeding up. "We're doing 190 knots, he mentions casually. Usually when you descend, you gain speed. But Stockstill's brain doesn't make the connection. He thinks it's just a fluctuation. He nudges the throttles back slightly to slow down. By pulling the power back, he unknowingly accelerates the descent. The plane gets heavier, it sinks faster. 900 feet. At the Miami Air Route Traffic Control Center, a controller looks at his radar screen. He sees a blip. The data block for Eastern 401 shows an altitude reading, 900 feet. He frowns. That shouldn't be right. They were assigned 2,000. But radar in 1972 is not like radar today. It is glitchy. It updates every 4 to 10 seconds. Sometimes it shows false targets. The controller thinks, it's just a momentary glitch. This is a veteran crew. Loft knows what he's doing. He decides to ask, just in case, but he doesn't want to sound accusatory. He doesn't want to insult the captain. So he asks a vague question. Eastern 401, how are things coming along out there? In the cockpit, Captain Loft hears the question. He thinks the controller is asking about the landing gear problem. We're trying to clear it up, Loft replies. We're checking it now. The controller hears a calm voice. He assumes everything is fine. He doesn't issue a low altitude alert. The opportunity to save the plane vanishes. 500 feet. The plane is now lower than the top of a skyscraper. It is rushing towards the sawgrass at 227 miles per hour. There is one final warning system. The L-1011 has a radio altimeter that measures the distance to the ground. When it reaches a certain altitude, it is supposed to emit a C-chord whistle. The investigators believe the whistle sounded on the flight engineer's panel, but Don Repo wasn't at his panel. He was in the hole in the floor, or perhaps in the noisy, distracted environment, with the three men arguing about the light bulb. The sound simply didn't register. 100 feet. First Officer Stockstill finally tears his eyes away from the light bulb. He looks at his main flight display. His brain freezes. The needle on the altimeter is not at 2,000. It is at 0. We did something to the altitude, Stockstill says. His voice is puzzled, confused. We're still at 2,000, right? Captain Loft looks up. Hey, what's happening here? Hey, what's happening here? Those are the last words spoken on the flight deck. The radio altimeter begins to scream. Beep, 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 beep. Loft's instincts kick in instantly. He rips the yoke back. He slams the throttles forward. The Rolls-Royce engines roar to life, trying to arrest the descent. The nose begins to rise. The passengers in the back are pushed into their seats by the sudden G-force. For a split second, it feels like they might make it, but inertia is a cruel law of physics. A 150-ton aircraft moving downward cannot stop instantly. The left wingtip catches the surface of the swamp. It doesn't splash, it grabs. The wing shears off, the fuel tanks rupture, the aircraft cartwheels. The fuselage rips apart like a paper tube. The cockpit section breaks off and tumbles into the mud. The passenger section disintegrates, throwing seats, luggage, and people into the darkness. There is a massive flash of blue light, not a firestorm, but an electrical arc as the power lines slice through the night. And then, silence. The Queen of the Skies lies broken in the mud. The scene in the Everglades is something out of a horror movie. It is pitch black. The smell of jet fuel is overpowering. It coats everything. The water, the grass, the survivors. Jet fuel is toxic. It burns the skin like acid. It blinds the eyes. Survivors wake up sitting in 6 inches of water. Some are still strapped into their seats. which are now lying sideways in the muck. Others have been thrown hundreds of feet away. There is screaming, but there is also a terrifying silence from the vast majority of the wreckage. And there is something else. The Everglades is a living ecosystem. It is filled with mosquitoes, sawgrass that cuts like razors, and alligators. Robert Marquis, a local fisherman who was out that night hunting frogs, witnessed the crash. He later said the fireball looked like a mushroom cloud. He is the unsung hero of this story. While the Coast Guard scrambled helicopters, Marquis fired up his tiny airboat. He raced directly into the darkness, towards the flames. He knew the swamp. He knew that the survivors would drown or succumb to exposure if he didn't act. When he arrived, he found a surreal scene. To keep their spirits up in the terrifying dark, survivors were singing. Jingle bells, silent night. Voices trembling with shock, singing Christmas carols in the middle of a disaster zone. Marquis used his light to scan the water. He saw eyes reflecting back, alligators moving toward the scent of blood. He used his airboat to block the predators, while loading trip after trip of injured people onto his small vessel. The jet fuel burned his face and arms, scarring him for life, but he didn't stop until the rescue helicopters arrived. Of the 176 people on board, 101 died. Captain Loft survived the initial impact, but died in the wreckage before rescuers could cut him free. First Officer Stockstill died instantly on impact. Don Repo survived the crash and was taken to the hospital, but he succumbed to his injuries a day later. The NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, arrived at the scene the next morning. What they found baffled them. The aircraft was mechanically perfect. The engines were working. The flight controls were functional. When they recovered the landing gear assembly from the mud, they found the answer to the question that killed 101 people. The landing gear was down. It was locked. It was perfectly safe. The light bulbs, they were burnt out. 2 tiny filaments of tungsten, worth pennies, had failed. The report, AAR 7314, is a damning document. It concluded that the probable cause was not a mechanical failure, but a human one. The failure of the flight crew to monitor the flight instruments during the final 4 minutes of flight, and to detect an unexpected descent soon enough to prevent impact. It was a tragedy of distraction, a tragedy of 3 highly experienced men forgetting the golden rule of aviation. Aviate, navigate, communicate, in that order. They stopped aviating to change a light bulb. But the story didn't end with the NTSB report. In fact, the crash of Flight 401 birthed a legend that persists to this day. Eastern Airlines, in an effort to save money, salvaged usable parts from the wreckage of N310EA. Ovens, galleys, elevators, and avionics computers that were undamaged were refurbished and installed into other L-1011s in the Eastern Fleet, specifically planes N318EA and N308EA. Soon after, flight crews on these planes began reporting impossible occurrences. A flight attendant on N318EA went to check the oven in the lower galley. She saw the face of Second Officer Don Repo staring back at her from the oven door reflection. She screamed and fled the galley. On another flight, a captain was doing his pre-flight checks. He saw a man in an Eastern captain's uniform sitting in first class. He didn't recognize him on the manifest. He walked over to ask the man if he was deadheading. The man looked up. It was Bob Loft. The captain froze. As he watched, the figure of Bob Loft slowly faded away into thin air. The stories multiplied. Mechanics claimed to see Don Repo down in the avionics bay, the hellhole, warning them about faulty circuits. "Watch out for the fire on this one," the apparition allegedly said. The rumors became so intense that they threatened to disrupt Eastern's operations. Crews were terrified to fly the haunted Tristars. John G. Fuller wrote a best-selling book, The Ghost of Flight 401, which documented these sightings. Eastern Airlines officially denied everything. They claimed it was mass hysteria, stress, and suggestion. They threatened to fire anyone who spread ghost stories. But quietly, according to insiders, they removed all the salvaged parts from the fleet. Once the parts from Flight 401 were gone, the sightings stopped. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, there is a psychological truth here. The aviation community was traumatized. Loft and Repo were respected men. Their deaths were senseless. The ghosts may have been a manifestation of the collective guilt and grief of an industry trying to process how such excellent pilots could make such a basic mistake. The true legacy of Flight 401 is not a ghost story. It is a revolution in how pilots talk to each other. Before this crash, the cockpit was a dictatorship. The captain was king. Junior pilots were trained to never question their superiors. If Stockstill had been trained differently, he might have said, "Captain, stop playing with the light. I am flying the plane. Look at the altitude." But in 1972, you didn't say that to a 30,000-hour legend like Bob Loft. Because of Flight 401 and later disasters like Tenerife, the concept of CRM, crew resource management, was born. Today, pilots are trained to work as a team. They are trained to challenge each other. I have the controls. You have the controls. These phrases are now sacred. You verify who is flying. You verify the automation. Flight 401 taught us that technology, no matter how advanced, cannot save us from ourselves. The L-1011 was a perfect machine, but it lacked the common sense to scream, "Wake up," when its masters fell asleep at the wheel. Today, if you fly on a modern jet, there are systems that scream, "Sink rate" or "Terrain pull up." Those voices exist because of the silence of the Everglades. The next time you are on a night flight and you look out the window into the pitch-black darkness below, remember the city of Miami flickering on the horizon. Remember the distraction of a 12-cent light bulb. And remember the crew of Flight 401, who flew a perfectly good airplane into the ground, because they forgot, for just a moment, that their primary job was to fly. We investigate these tragedies not to scare you, but to understand the fragile line between safety and disaster. The calm before history is often just a burnt-out light bulb away from chaos. I'm Eddie, and this has been The Calm Before History. If you want to support our channel and help us keep these stories alive, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what is a local tragedy in your town that history seems to have forgotten? Good night, and stay safe.